I haven't given you the article to read on the voice of innocence and the voice of experience yet. I think we'll be able to squeeze it in at some point. You do have it, it's attached to the piece Archipelago. We have talked about some of these concepts already, though. Think back to Soft in the Middle, when you have the narrator um, reimagining the road trip, and the narrator, the writer, embodies the child that she was. It would be very odd if a child were to speak as the narrator in the voice of an adult. So when you are writing from the voice of innocence, or uh, from the perspective of that person who experienced uh, whatever it was at that particular time, you need to make sure that you are embodying that character. So you might be writing about yourself as a younger person at a different time. You might be writing about someone else who experienced something in the past. Whatever that might be, that's what the voice of innocence refers to. So the voice of innocence is seen essentially. Um, you're replaying this scene, and you're replaying it from the perspective of the people who were there, and in particular the person who is the narrator. So the surface, you're writing the subject and the action, you're perhaps relating the dialogue that was spoken then, you're revealing the raw, not yet understood emotions associated with the story's action by portraying the person you or someone else was when the sequence of events took place. That's the voice of innocence. And so we've seen this in a number of pieces, particularly Soft in the Middle, definitely Archipelago. Um, so keep that in mind. As the scene unfolds, the scene will be enacted by characters who experienced it at that time. Now, sometimes um, the voice of innocence and the voice of experience might not have as much space between them. For example, I would say that Moving Water Tucson almost tells the whole story in the voice of innocence. Very cleverly, because you get the feeling of what's important about that story. It works in that context anyway. So then you have the voice of experience, which is a more mature voice. So it is the reflection, the epiphany, the understanding, what they have understood from the experience. So it interprets and reflects upon the subject or the scene or whatever uh, the piece talks about. So the voice of experience adds more mature voice or persona that explains and deepens the voice of innocence with metaphor, irony, reflection. It's a more complex viewpoint because it interprets and reflects upon the surface subject. So think about that in the context of the pieces that we've read so far. Um, Perhaps, let's go back to Soft in the Middle. There's a lot of reflection that takes place in that piece because the author is reflecting on these experiences that had happened a long time ago, and um, reflecting on her relationship with her father, and so on. So, this is one lens that you can use to look at a piece as you're writing it. It can be useful. It can help you embody these different characters within a piece. It can help you identify why you are writing something. Like, why are you writing this particular scene? Why are you sharing this particular detail? Why are you choosing this language? Some of these tips were already covered earlier in the slideshow, but we'll skip around a little bit. Often we want to start in the middle. This is a great quote by Jason Lee Norman. Arrive late to the party and leave early. So for a moment, let's just think about that in the context of the pieces we've talked about. Moving Water Tucson takes place over the course of really just a few minutes. By the end of the story, we're right in the middle of the climax. We're right in the middle of the defining event of the story, and we don't move past it. That's where the reader is left. So there is no denouement. We don't know what happened afterwards. We're left with the image of the boy sinking under the water. In Undercurrent is interesting because we don't even get to what actually happens. We have to figure out what is happening in that piece. We know that there is anticipation of an event. We can imagine what it might be, but we don't actually experience it. Oh, the piece by Celia is interesting because it happens after. Think about it for a second. It actually happens after. So we are essentially seeing this brief flash of denouement. We are not experiencing what actually happened. We're seeing something, just a little reflection on something afterwards. So don't think about covering the topic, the scene extensively. Think about how you can get the idea across with the material that's most important. And be thinking about how you want to approach that. So for a moment, let's go back to Moving Water Tucson. What's important about that scene? Well, I think that what's important about that scene from the perspective of the author is this life-changing moment in time when things happen so fast and are unimaginably unpredictable. And everything that comes after, which we don't see, would have changed for this person and for the people around this person. So, what if the author had decided to go a different direction with that piece? What if the author had focused, say, on the friendship between these two children and had focused on possibly the guilt that the narrator feels for this event? What if the author played up something that had happened before? Or what if the author looked back on this event and reflected on this moment being the time when their life changed? What approach do you take to a subject matter like that? Perhaps this could be a flashback. It could be a flashback to this event through the eyes of the older narrator when they think about it in comparison to a similar event that happens 10, 20 years later. There are many approaches to a story idea. Be thinking about that when you're deciding to craft your story. What is the key scene you want to convey, or character, or whatever it is, and then how do you want to tell that, particularly if you're doing event. So if you end up doing that for your project, what is really important about the event? Why does it matter to your reader? Don't use too many characters. Even a name may not be useful unless it conveys additional meaning. So avoid overpopulation in these stories because you don't have much space. If you get into having a lot of characters, it's going to be confusing for the reader. And it's going to feel unnecessary usually, in most cases. Make sure the ending isn't at the end. I think we've already um, mentioned this. We've mentioned the title. Make the last line ring like a bell, but don't make it ring like a joke. Just be mindful of that. Write long, then go short. This isn't how I do this kind of a story, but I know I've had a lot of people tell me that this is a strategy that works for them, so I wanted to include this. This isn't the only way to do it, but it might be useful to you. So in this case, you're telling your story, you're going as long as you want, and then you are chipping away at it to find what's really important and seeing what you're left with.